Women have had the worst labour market experience from the crisis. In terms of people dropping hours, you're more likely to be made redundant.
There have been people who are more exposed to the virus and people more exposed to the economic consequences of the virus. And it's the people who are more vulnerable anyway.
Dad's never been here. I'm a single parent, and they're so shocked, and they're also very rude about it.
It's been a year since the virus infected all of our lives, but some more than others. Many single parents have been suffering in silence as the COVID-19 virus spreads across Scotland, exposing inequalities that have been building up over decades. Lone parents have been locked down in their homes with increasing household costs, discrimination intensifying, and the uncertainty of already insecure low-paid jobs in the labour market as Scotland hits its worst recession in 300 years.
There was a lot of people that kind of didn't really know I was struggling, and I didn't really know how to ask for it because I didn't want to take help that was for other people. So we just kind of ended up, we found a farm shop that sold fruit and veg, and we got a local dairy to deliver milk, which cost an absolute fortune, but at least I had stuff coming to the house when I couldn't get a delivery slot. I couldn't get out to the shop. I couldn't drive anywhere. I was just I felt like, I know everyone felt it as well, but I felt like I was totally trapped and I was in this prison cell.
Definitely the worry about what this thing was and this virus was and how it was going to affect us, and how the things what would happen if I got it, who would look after Harris and what would happen to Harris, and obviously the unthinkable, what if he got it. And it affected my son a lot as well because he'd heard it on the news and the radio, wherever you went it was on all the time. And he kept saying that, I'm going to die, my mate, and what happens if you're going to die? And it was that sort of, I felt almost like I can't do this. How am I going to do this? I'm just not mentally strong enough to actually persevere. I'm not mentally strong enough to do everything that I needed to do. So we made a point of going and visiting everybody's gardens at one point and talking through the window and vice versa. But yeah, that you couldn't say, I feel like I'm struggling today, and shout in the middle of the street that you're struggling, because you don't really want the whole world to know that you're struggling either.
After my son was born, it triggered my PTSD, just with the type of birth that it was. It was quite traumatic. So in January, I had to be sent to a psychiatrist, and he gave me help through the mental health and the community team. So between January and February, they would come to my house once or twice a week and just sort of check up on me, and the lockdown happened in March. All of that stopped, so no one would come into my house, no one was checking on me. I hit a massive rock bottom around about April, May time. Because of the social isolation of lockdown, I wasn't getting the appropriate help, and suicidality was coming through quite strongly. And again, there was no help, even though I told them, I'm kind of ready to end things here. But I still received no help because they said that we can't come down to the house, we can't do anything.
I'd been hospitalised a few months before I got pregnant for an overdose. And then obviously the pandemic, my sessions stopped for months and I didn't really have anyone, and because I was in the middle of counselling, I'd reached a point of progress that just kind of got wiped away. Obviously I'd brought all those feelings up and finally managed to tell people, and they were all kind of sitting now because I wasn't denying it anymore. So I'd brought it all up, and then I had no one to talk to and no one to help me and no support systems. It's really difficult when I need a minute and I just can't get it. And with everything going on, the rules and stuff, it doesn't really allow me to get a break, because nobody can come into my house and watch her for 5 minutes for me to go and go to the toilet. Even going to the toilet, I have to take her with me. It's simple things that people take for granted that I don't have the luxury of enjoying.
There's enough time to survive, but there's not enough time to do what I want to do. For someone like me, I needed practical support. It didn't work being on the phone because it meant the babies escalated. So for me, practical support was everything, and it all disappeared instantly. So I I was a mess. I was back to crying every day and being totally overwhelmed all of the time for quite a while. And it still overwhelms me a fair bit, but that first few months especially was hell, and the first lockdown was terrible. I'd never pursued it, but I'd say I fell into depression with it. I was anxious constantly. My breathing was always up. I was on the point of tears a lot most days during the first lockdown. It was a charity that brought me a bag of food every week. That was more helpful than the food bank stuff, because a lot of general food banks, it's a lot of stale bread and there's a lot of things that aren't healthy. And when you're trying to give little ones nutritious food because they're in an important stage of development, it's not good. If I hadn't have had the supermarket vouchers and if I hadn't have had the food bags, I would have been screwed.
Sometimes it wasn't not having the resources, like not having the money for food. Sometimes it was just, see, as a single parent trying to make that decision about, do I take my child into the war zone of COVID to go food shopping? You know, if your primary shopping is Lidl or Aldi, you don't have an online shop availability. And so a single parent having to make that fearful call of, okay, like, I've got to take my kid into public now, you know, where I'm scared to go.
Do I want to spend a couple of quid on bread when I know I've not paid the gas bill? So yeah, just the kind of mental gymnastics of trying to prepare and not have to live day to day. That for me, obviously, is amplified being in like lockdown.
I think what's happened is that single parents have always faced stigma and inequality and discrimination. So that's why there's higher rates of poverty and higher rates of mental ill health. But then I think what's happened in the pandemic is those inequalities have been pushed to the fore. So like single parents have been more likely to get furloughed or lose their job or lose hours. So their incomes got even worse. And because they're already towards the margins, then obviously that's dropped hugely.
It has impacted, like the cost of shopping seems to be a lot more. And I don't know if that's because we're in, but my bills are a lot higher, like electricity and gas. And because of winter, it's been absolutely freezing. So the heating's been on a lot more. Things like you wouldn't necessarily think of, like being in your house all the time, but my bills have gone, my phone bill's gone higher. My son, like, he's a 6-year-old boy, he eats non-stop. So because he's at home all the time, he's eating more as well. I've relying on the food to go we've got up here. They provide like a loaf of bread, ham, cheese, butter. I know that he's at least getting a lunch. It's emotionally and physically draining as well. Like when you're constantly worrying about money and food and where's the next like kind of meal going to come from. And Sara said to my mum that I hadn't had tea for like 2 days or something like that. So my mum was like, everything that was buy one get one free, she like packed it in a bag for me. It took 2 months for my college money to come in, so that was quite hard. Like my friends were like, there were like food bags at my door just of stuff like that from people and stuff, because they know that obviously you need to eat to survive and things like that.
You know, if they're not at school, because school gives a lot of structure to people's lives, and when that's away, and if the family, you know, if the housing is a bit overcrowded and there's pressure for food and heating and things, you know, all of that is going to be a disadvantage during COVID. You know, it's not great at normal times, but COVID is making it worse, I think, and putting more pressure on people.
It takes enormous investment in excellent education to overcome the disadvantage that you're entering school with. Some kids are just not school ready. And unless they get additional treatment to get them up to speed, they're always going to be languishing under a burden compared to their relatively more protected, more affluent peers. That means that they're going to earn less. That means that they're going to be more vulnerable to unemployment. That means they're more likely to actually cost us because they're not paying taxes to the same level. They're going to require social security. That means that they may have more interaction with social workers and social services. They're going to have poorer health, so they're going to cost us the NHS. There is a correlation with their engagement with the criminal justice system, so they're going to cost us more in terms of police. So I always regard child poverty as something that we can't afford because it costs us more. It costs us more to have it than to cure it.
I've got 3 kids at home with me, from 9 up to 17. So we've had kind of primary school, we had one at high school and one at college. So my son that was at college, he left, he found it a real struggle to do in lockdown. I was the same, I had to leave my course as well, just my mental health was awful. I just found it so difficult to like try and figure out how to help them and do my own stuff. It was more a case of I've just got to get my kids through each day. We're still in a kind of position where I'm putting their mental health before their schoolwork, and the school can bring that up later or whatever, but it's stressful. And like, I mean, it's been a while since I was at school, so I don't know the ways of teaching. I'm not a teacher.
You know, I do fear that some people just use mental health as a bit of an excuse. And absolutely we should take mental health seriously. But you know, I mean, kids are going to benefit from a bit of discipline and a bit of the parents telling them that they've got to do their schoolwork.
Actually being your child's primary educator is a massive leap. So if you already have on top of that your own mental health problems, stress, anxiety, fear, all of those things, and then you're thrown into this world of, you know, now you also have to educate your kid. Now you also got to deal with them for 8 hours longer a day. And that's even if you are sat at home going, do you know what? I'm not going to engage in homeschooling because I'm not a teacher, or I feel they just need to be relaxed. Even if you take that sort of kind of relaxed attitude, there's still like 8 hours to fill a day, you know, where you don't have breathers, you know, aside from locking yourself in the bathroom. There's not much you can do to get away from the kids, to, you know, to get that peace of mind, or to breathe again, you know, as a single parent especially.
My son was freaking out about not being at school and having to go to a hub that would be different from his normal school, and then he could come with me and then he couldn't come with me because I worked in a school, but I worked in the additional support unit, so he couldn't be there. So I was just up and down. So, and like I say, his behaviour was off the scale to begin with. He smashed the window in the first week. I've got 6-foot fences in my back garden, and he scaled them and was like running down the street just because it's like, just because he can, with a big smile on his face. I was like, oh my goodness. Homeschooling was like a daily battle of getting him to do. When you've got a child that it takes you all morning to do like 3 jobs on his classwork, and then you've got a house to run, and like you say, you're being mum, dad at the best of times, and you've also got your own college work, it's like, nah. We had a nightmare the first time because I only had my phone, so it drained the battery down ridiculous, and the writing was so small because obviously it's a phone. And then like we would be halfway through a job and somebody would phone or text, and it would come out as the job that we were doing. Obviously that took priority, and then we'd have to start again. It's like, yeah, losing the plot.
Because women often take a career break for having children, that disadvantages their career, and therefore long term they end up earning less money. So that is still an issue we absolutely need to work on. You know, the danger is kids are losing out because the schools are not functioning, because the schools are not perfect. But, you know, at least then an able child from a poorer background can get a boost from being at school, can do well at school, and then can go into, you know, a better job and earn more money. And the fear at the moment is that child is if they're not at school, they're at home, they're not benefiting as much, and in fact the attainment gap or whatever is widening between children from better off backgrounds and children from poorer backgrounds.
But most schools, those gaps don't narrow, and in fact some cases they widen. So even before we massive shift to home learning and isolation and the stress of living in constrained circumstances and physically contained, all of that making education and keeping body and soul together challenging. There are already inequalities in the formal on-site education system. I think they're going to be significantly widened.
If you haven't got a family network to try and help with some of the emotional labour, the kind of general day-to-day parenting and just looking after yourself and your child, if you haven't got a job that allows you to work flexibly, that allows you to either work part-time or to say, actually, my child's ill today. I mean, these things are particularly acute during COVID, where the government can say, we're shutting schools and nurseries for a week, and then it turns into 6 months. How do lone parents deal with that? So I think lone parents have always been seen, for some reason, as less deserving in a benefit system. There's definitely layers of inequality around women's work, around lone parents, around policy decision making during the sort of COVID crisis, that absolutely has not understood women's lives, working lives, and parenting. And that, again, that's mostly acute for lone parents, which on the whole tend to be single mothers.
I suppose working class people are more at risk of COVID. And we speak about that as though that's because, well, there must be something different about them that makes them more at risk, rather than the fact that like their poverty and the situation they're in forces them to live a lifestyle that puts them more at risk. I think there's so many people who've been forced to just keep putting themselves in situations that mean that these communities are so much more at risk of infection and death, ultimately.
Like 60% of those paid below living wage are women, which talks a little bit about the kind of occupational segregation and the devaluation of certain industries, care, hospitality, retail, which are dominated by women, and again, more likely to have lone parents working than them. When we strip back of what we actually need, we need our vulnerable cared for, our elderly cared for, and that's predominantly done by low-paid care workers. Again, predominantly women, and often in insecure work. We also needed our shop workers, again, low-paid temporary work. They need a better deal out of this. I think that was quite clear.
I got a job, but it was just so low paid that I can't afford. So it was like a wage supplement for universal credit. And yeah, you got kind of judged on as like, why don't you just get more hours at work? Or why don't you just do this? Or why don't you find another job that pays better? I got judged a lot.
JRF have campaigned and still are campaigning for the £20 uplift to be kept. It is a vital lifeline to people. The difference between being able to choose to pay your bills or your heating, or being able to put food on the table, and it makes a difference between being in debt and not being in debt.
I think it probably should be more than £20. I'm not convinced that £20 is an adequate amount. I think it's an amount that many anti-poverty organisations agreed on was manageable for the government to say yes to. Over time, we've seen this push of getting, particularly mothers, into work. It was for a while your child was 16, then it was your child was 11, then it was your child was 7, and now it's all the way down to 2 or 3 for some people. It's just an increasing pressure on lone parents for a pittance in return to live on.
I don't get the £20 uplift that everyone supposedly gets for universal credit. Because of the benefit cap, because my rent's so high, I don't actually get that. So for the first time ever, I mean, I've been private renting since 2008, so a long time, and January this year was the first time I've ever had to miss a rent payment. I just had to juggle so much that I was I can't make that work. I was late with my gas and electricity, and I was just I can't make this work. There's nowhere else to borrow it from or juggle it to. It's it's just not going to stretch. Once my rent's paid, there's less than half of the universal credit left to live off. So I do get what I'm supposed to get, but because my 17-year-old left college as well, I don't get universal credit for him anymore. He didn't ever get a bursary while he was at college. I don't get child benefit for him anymore. So I only get the amount for 2 children, but there are essentially 2 children and an adult child, basically. Yeah, there's nothing safe. I've got rid of Sky. I don't have Sky TV. I don't have, I've cut down absolutely everything I can think of. So there's no way to have that kind of stuff. And I feel like it's me. And I think that's the kind of point of it, is to almost back you into a corner where what they think is they back you into a corner, and then you pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you go out and you get a job, and that's it. It's just like this magic wand. Whereas like you back people into a corner, and all it does is they crumble. Like they take it on like internally, where it's like, it's me, I'm a terrible person, I'm a horrible mother, I'm not responsible, I'm not a good person. That's not going to make you go out there and do well.
It made you feel a little bit worthless, like you couldn't even financially provide for a child. So it made you a bit worthless as a mother, even though I'm trying my hardest and really running about juggling all sorts of things with a job, with studying, trying to be a parent. I'm juggling all this and I'm still being judged and stigmatized. Like, I don't need that.
The benefit system's crap, as a lot of people know. I've always worked, I've never had to receive benefits, so that was quite it was like that embarrassment side, like having to actually like go for it and like claim the benefits, because there's a stigma that then goes attached. Like you feel the stigma of being like a single mum and like in a wee flat, and then having to receive benefits even though I was working at the same time.
I certainly think in-work poverty is a big issue, bigger than maybe it used to be. That it used to be assumed that if you were in work, then that was okay. That was just problem solved, and that's not the case, because we've got people where one, I think actually they say the majority of kids in poverty, one of the adults in the household is working, and that is a difficult area certainly for our government to deal with.
We have a heavy load of jobs, same as America actually, they do too, in this very low income part. So if you start cutting tax credits and cutting benefits to be lower, and generally in the UK, every political party since the dawn of time has argued that benefits should be set lower than the lowest paid job, right? So if you've got a low paid economy and benefits even lower, all this is under the poverty line, like old people's care and childcare. It's very, very low paid work. It's very costly if you're purchasing the services, but if you're working in there, it's extremely low paid. That is a gender issue. So that part of the labour market, the way those wages are set, the way the system's designed, it's a structural part of it. But the government at any point could subsidise that industry.
There's a significant amount of benefit financially to the economy of having a better run resource care sector, and that would include paying the people that are in it, again predominantly women, at a higher rate. So it's choices that we can make. I think there's public will we've shown in recent surveys, a public will to make changes and impact on poverty. What we need is the politicians to match that public will with kind of courage and kind of new thinking as well, to not just do the same old. Otherwise we won't be meeting these child poverty targets. In Scotland there's the child poverty targets. So by 2030 there's a certain amount that we're meant to reduce child poverty by, and the interim targets that we're meant to reduce child poverty by are in 2023. Now, children in lone parent households make up around 40% of all the children in poverty.
So welfare rights advisors have raised concerns for many years about the existence and the growth of these holes in the safety net. And what I think COVID has done is really brought them to the public attention, because millions more people have had to now engage in with social security.
Supposed to go back from maternity leave a couple of weeks into lockdown, and that didn't happen because there was no childcare or anything. So at the start, they're keeping my job open, but they wouldn't put me on furlough, and it was quite a fight. I got in touch with my local MP and eventually got put on furlough by my company. And then they took me off early because they said it was this blanket company decision. So then I was back with nothing. And then you suddenly got to wait another 6 weeks for benefits. So then it's like a double whammy. Like you're on zero income and zero benefits until it all kicks in again. Because I don't know what the answer is for a single parent, because at least if you're in a partnership, my company said I could do flexible hours. So I think a lot of jobs have offered more flexible hours, but that's kind of assuming there's someone to take over from you. And in the evenings, I couldn't even work in the evenings because I've got to then wash napkins and cook and then eat myself. If I had a partner, then we could have tag teamed, but for a single parent, I don't know what the answer is.
When they introduced these restrictions, they were assuming a two-parent family, and they were probably kind of assuming quite a middle-class, middle-income family at that as well. So they're thinking, oh, people can work from home, you can split the roles. Okay, it's still really tough, of course, to tag team if both of you are working from home. But obviously, if it's insecure work and you don't know if you're going to get it, or it's stuff that you would need to leave the house for, but you can't get childcare, then you can't continue.
The other problem is that if a child is in school from 9 till 3, then, you know, the parent's job is more like 9 to 5 or something else. So we then need to expand, I think, the, you know, childcare before and after work. I think that would help both lower income parents generally, but particularly mothers.
The ideas in public is just like it's all about childcare, which is obviously a massive part, but I don't think it's not the only game in town. We need to make sure that jobs are designed fairly. We're looking at ways to better get lone parents better trained so that they can, once they're in jobs, they can progress. But also working with employers to see how we can design jobs so that part-time work can be better paid and more meaningful.
I was like, well, what about my contract? And the Fife Council were basically like, you've got an 18-hour contract, we can effectively put you anywhere for 18 hours. But so it kind of left a level of uncertainty that I could be anywhere in Fife at any given day with my son and stuff like that by myself. So yeah, everything just kind of, and I struggled like emotionally and physically and stuff about lockdown. So I was just like, no, it's not the right thing to do. And it's the first time in my life I've ever just had to give something up. And because I gave up the job, I got nothing from the benefit system, as you do, because they're so understanding with these things. Still in this day and age, I still feel there's stigma. As soon as you say you're a single mum, then a lot of employers kind of like, well, if your child's sick, it's only you that's going to look after it. It's like, if your child has a problem, you're the only person, like it's never going to be split. You're going to have to take all your holidays and the summer holidays. They're automatically thinking these barriers in their heads before, it doesn't matter how capable you are of your job. As soon as you say you're a single mum, I feel that people are just like, nah, because there's nobody else that can take the slack.
But why have we got this stigma still? Why do people feel like they can't become a single parent, or becoming a single parent is a negative? It's not. It's hugely empowering. The challenges, most of the challenges, or many of the challenges that it involves, are actually connected to how society treats us as single parents. But the risk is that because that discrimination exists and the stigma exists, that say as people, the economy reopens and people are trying to get back into work or trying to increase hours again and things like that, that this discrimination will then put extra barriers around single parents. So we won't see the change. The improvement in employment rate, for example, of other groups is likely to increase faster and easier than it is for single parents. So what we're asking for as single parent rights as a campaign group is we want single parents to be added to the Equality Act, because what we feel is that single parents aren't considered when a policymaker comes up with policy, or an employer is thinking about how to be inclusive and supportive of their employees. They're not thinking specifically about single parents, because essentially they're not told to. We're not in the Equality Act, so they don't have to think of us proactively as a group to ensure they don't inadvertently or otherwise discriminate against us. So we really think that first and foremost we need to be added to the Equality Act, so that ideally we're considered before discrimination occurs, but then if discrimination does occur, then that can be addressed through legal routes. But then also, yeah, it's about stigma, it's about trying to raise awareness, partly of the challenges that single parents face, so employers and businesses can try to address those, but also about the positives of single parenting, so it's not seen in a negative light.
It's so ingrained into society, I probably stigmatise myself a wee bit in the way that I feel like I'm not giving Mariella a full family, or I'm not giving her the support of the two parents that she should received, everything kind of focuses on family situations and large families or families where everything works out, and it's not realistic, especially in this day and age. And I know so many people that are single parents, or even if they're not single parents, don't have the best family situation, but it doesn't mean that they can't parent their children or have a healthy relationship with their children just because it's not the typical family. Even when you see like adverts and stuff on TV, it's always families featured in it. Like there's never single parents.
It's usually like the scheme mum that's usually like depicted in like dramas and films and things like that. That she's got like 6 different fathers, but same-sex parents are more accepted than single parents. We should all be accepted. Like we've all got a job to do. It's already stressful and pressurised. Why do we need to stigmatise it and put more pressure and stress to it? I just find it really horrible, like how people treat you.
You kind of wish the people that were setting the budgets and the money and that, like, and I know there's not an infinite amount of money. I know it's got to come from places and whatnot, but I feel like you should be like, go and come and just have a week or like a couple of days with what I've got and where I live and the things that I've got, and then tell me what I'm supposed to do with that to survive. And it's just going to be like, go and come and just understand what it's like. I just sometimes feel that, yeah, you're portrayed as you're not a person, you're a statistic.
Inequalities in health, education, income and gender that already existed before the pandemic have exacerbated during this crisis. As the vaccine rolls out and restrictions ease across the nation, governments at all levels need to ensure that lone parents are not left behind in policy and services created in response to the recovery of COVID-19. Single parents have the duty of the breadwinner and the full-time carer, with 40% of all children in poverty from lone parent households. This is likely to continue if single parents are left suffering in silence.